Academics, victims, offenders, police and government officials confronted South Africa's troubled parole system at a two-day gathering in Pretoria. They say the current system is fragmented, unfair and puts communities at risk. Delegates are calling for the system to be streamlined. Correctional Services Minister Pieter Groenewald says clarity is vital in ensuring public trust.
So if you have a separate act for parole, then you can have everything there. But now you have to refer to different acts if you want to see that people are going on parole, what the criteria is for that. Mostly of them, of course, is part of the Correctional Services Act. But I think the fact that you will have a separate one, you can more adequately address certain issues.
Parole falls under the Correctional Services Act, which covers everything from prison management to rehabilitation. With no dedicated framework, boards make life-changing decisions guided only by policies, which critics say are inconsistent.
At the moment, it consists of 6 members. 4 of those members are members from the community. There are 52 parole boards in South Africa. Now, the call here over the last 2 days was actually that you also have to have psychologists on that board, criminologists, social workers, people who are specializing in the field of whether people have a high risk or not. Because for me, that is the most important matter. We have an obligation to ensure that the public and communities are safe when we put someone on parole. And the strongest indicator, if a person is, can I say, available or can go on parole, is what is the risk of reoffending. Therefore, you need these professionals, also part of the parole boards.
But at the heart of reform is balancing the rights of victims and the hope for rehabilitation. Groenewald believes the system needs to be more victim-centered without shutting the door to second chances.
The role of the victims are very, very, very important for them. They must be part of the system where before you approve a parole. And I agree with that. Well, at the moment, it also already provides for it. The Criminal Procedures Act provides for that. But we do have too many cases where the victims are not properly considered because of administration problems. They don't make contact with them. The victims have problems by having contact with the parole boards. And we have to look into that. It's a delicate balance we have to take when it comes to parole. Yes, and I said, if we talk about parole, even if we talk about corrections, it is a societal responsibility.
For victims of violent crime, that balance often feels painfully one-sided. One woman, whose mother was murdered, says she lives in fear every day that the killer, which is her own father, could come back for her.
I'm not really comfortable with it because he's been threatening me ever since he got evicted. So I'm not sure if I can handle that. Yeah. They must serve their whole sentence inside, not get out on parole. Just stay in for those years, not be out. Because sometimes you find that we are not ready for that. We haven't healed fully.
Lawyers representing victims say families are rarely told when an offender is released and that the parole system often leads to dangerous individuals being freed into society with little regard for consequences.
You know, the tragedy is, in some of the parole board hearings, there's an obligation, of course, on the Department of Correctional Services and the parole board to inform these victims of a sitting. But some of them, even though the victim has registered to participate, the invitation just simply doesn't come. So we have somebody sitting in a coffee shop having tea and cake with a friend, and the rapist will walk in and sit at the table next to them. And they didn't even know that there was a hearing or that this person has been released.
Attorney Tanya Kuhn has represented many victims in high-profile cases. She's calling for more education to ensure that victims understand their rights in the parole process.
Victims often feel that their constitutional rights are disregarded or in fact are trumped by those of the offenders. And this is especially true when we're talking about lifers. Lifers is obviously those whom have a life sentence have been imposed. So in that instance, there's a perception that life isn't life. But it's not, that shouldn't be. The default should be you are sentenced to a life imprisonment unless you are properly rehabilitated and you don't pose a danger to society. Only then should you be released. But to be considered for parole because you've served the minimum sentence is not an automatic right to be released on parole. And that's where our education of the parole boards, that's where we advocate for the parole boards must take the entire profile of the offender into account. And we find that that is most certainly lacking.
The call to overhaul the system comes as the men responsible for the 1994 rape, assault and stabbing of Alison Botha were sent back to prison by Correctional Services Minister. The Parole Board has also recommended that murdered university student Lee Matthews' killer, Donovan Moodley, be released from jail. The Correctional Services Commissioner says change is long overdue.
The suggestion that we should have a separate act, for me, is also a good suggestion because you can now be detailed in how you describe or how you make specific provisions, as it has been said or it has been mentioned in the summit, for victims, and also how you make it a point that in as much as you support the offenders, you hold them accountable. So for me, I would support a separate act for the parole system with that proviso in mind that we will then be able to have more details, especially on the issue of achieving a victim-centric parole system.
Other proposals include a better system to notify police when offenders are released to help communities prepare and stay safe.
I don't have to go to correctional service and request in the community correction to say how many people are going to release, what type of offenses did they commit. And when I get that list manually, it might be too late. Rather than when time to time, if it's on the system, we can monitor from the desk to say, every day we check who is released or who is going to be released in a month or two, and we start preparing. People on the ground, even the community on the ground, need to have a say and input and to monitor or assist the law enforcement in monitoring those people, their general conduct, whether they improved, they rehabilitated, or they just faked the rehabilitation for them to be released, and then they go back and reoffend. Through that manual approach, we are able, when we realize, oh, since so-and-so is out, there is increase on outbreak in this territory, and that's where that parole is residing.
Police say many offenders harden behind bars instead of reforming due to tough prison environments.
Some come when, let's say, they went to prison having committed just one murder out of argument in a tavern, but when they come back, they graduated. They become car thieves, they become business robbers, they become cash in transit because inside the prison, some of them end up being contaminated by the people around them. They learn more tricks. They then graduate from being that one who killed a person maybe in an argument at a tavern to somebody who is more aggressive, more violent. Those are some of the challenges.
But there are those who break the cycle.
I committed a crime, I murdered someone, I took a life of someone, Kaphoso, because of the financial implications. The parole system, infile a second chance, after doing or, participating in the programs that the Department of Correctional Services offers to Rona by Lohoring. We are incarcerated, as part of our rehabilitation, so also being on good behavior, they can, eligible for a second chance.
Maponya is now a published author and a barber. He reflects on why many parolees end up reoffending.
When you do a mistake in life, you become responsible for your own flaws. You don't wait to be pushed. You don't wait to be told to change or to better yourself. It all begins with you. As much as the parole, it's in place, it's there, to ensure reintegration is smooth back into the community. But I believe it all begins with yourself. So while I was while I was still in prison, inside, now I've taken a chance to change my life, to accept and take accountability of my mistake, knowing that it was, a very big crime that I did, and an offense that it's irreversible. And I know the impact it has not impacted only, the victim's family, but it has in fact impacted the community at large.
But academics warn that the system itself is part of the problem. In the past year, 209 parolees committed murder, over 330 committed rape. In the Western Cape alone, parole has become a revolving door feeding gang violence. In just 1 year, nearly 2,400 were released. Over 250 of them went straight back to crime.
The policy positioning paper on parole boards must be issued and published by the Department of Correctional Service to stop the alarming levels of reoffending. A reply by the minister recently highlighted the dangerous link, key for our discussion at our plenaries, between the parole policy failures and the ongoing gang and drug wars happening up in Cape Town.
Many delegates believe a standalone Parole Act could close loopholes and ensure accountability from offenders. For Newzroom Afrika on Channel 405, I'm Veronica Makhoali in Pretoria.